Hi. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the Microsoft Surface. So it may not seem like it, but the Microsoft Surface has actually been around for quite a while, going through various different iterations over time. So at the beginning, the first iteration, we had the Surface RT. So the Surface RT was kind of a welcome change. It was kind of a new form factor as far as laptops is concerned. It was it wasn't the first hybrid, but it was one of the first, I would say, kind of adopted hybrid out of the bunch. And but the Surface RT actually had kind of some flaws that wasn't obvious when people first bought it. So a lot of people bought it and it was like, oh, this is cool. Looks just like Windows. It's portable. It's lightweight. But when they got it home, they tried to start running their traditional older x86 software. They found that, hey, you can't run any of this software. And the only software you could run was software available in the Windows Store. And at the time, the Windows Store was essentially barren. There was not a whole lot of quality apps available within the store. So Surface RT actually resulted in quite a few returns to the stores, and it actually resulted in quite a big write down on Microsoft behalf of several $1 billion of this failed venture. I actually still have my Surface RT, and today, because of the storage type that they had with it, it doesn't work that well. I kind of tell that the storage that's in it is starting to die, and and then again, there's not a whole lot of apps that you can run on it. So yeah, that was the Surface RT. So moving forward, actually they kind of released it around the same time, the Surface RT as well as the Surface Pro. So the Surface Pro was a full-blown workstation laptop, can run all of the apps, all the traditional apps, and it also had that added benefit of being kind of a hybrid laptop where you can detach the keyboard and continue working with things. Kind of introduced the type and touch cover keyboards. So the main difference is that the type one, actually the buttons did go in like a traditional keyboard. They had some travel, but the touch keyboard cover had really no travel, and it was very thin. So that was kind of the trade-off. The typing experience on it wasn't the best, but so if you just kind of wanted something super thin, then it was something you could buy. And then the other thing about the Surface Pro, it was really market defining. With once these products start coming out, this is kind of the design flow that Microsoft was kind of pushing, and then other OEMs like HP, Dell, and others start following suit with their own similar products as time went on. Moving forward, we moved over to the Surface Pro 2. And again, the Surface Pro 2 could run all the apps. Had additional refinements in the design, so it became a little bit thinner, became a little bit cooler. The kickstand got a little bit more flexibility and more stance or more positions, so you can kind of sit it a little bit better. Still wasn't perfect, but it was improvement, and then the market started picking up a little bit steam at this point. Moving forward, then we had the Surface 3. So the Surface 3, it kind of changed a little bit in the tensions behind it. So at this point, it was another laptop that could run all apps. However, what they did this time is they introduced a little bit slower Intel Atom processor that was a little bit more power efficient than the traditional like Core i5, Core i3, M3 processor series. So still had additional refined design. So a lot of design improvements that came along, it received those, received the improved screen, and also improved battery life. So a lot of the improved battery life came from, again, using that lower powered Intel processor, gave it a little bit better power life. And then we also introduced at this time, they introduced LTE support. So this is one of actually the first Surface laptop that actually supported LTE. So the Surface 3 was, so moving forward to the Surface Pro 3, this is also one that I actually ended up buying. So on this one, again, you could run all the apps. The design improved more, so the kickstand had even more flexibility. So it didn't have fixed stop points. You can just kind of push it almost vertically all the way down, and then you can stop it anywhere along the way. Also got improved performance. The screen quality got a little bit better. So the Surface line, just in general, has always pretty much had near the top of the line screens at the time when they were released, and that tradition has continued on through the whole series as things come on. And the Surface Pro 3 is really where really the steam behind the Surface actually kicked off, where getting more OEMs to follow suit and start building more and more clones to be competitive in the market, and following the design lead of Microsoft to continue on, moving on to the Surface Pro 4. And then again, it's just kind of continually design and refining the product as time go on. So a little bit more flexibility in kickstand, a little bit more tweaks in battery life and performance. So as Intel released a little bit better, more power efficient processors, Surface Pro 4, the benefit of that. So moving forward to the present, now we're back full circle to now we have another Surface Pro. So they weren't really creative in naming this latest iteration of the Surface. So it's been out for several months now. But just recently, it hasn't. I don't think it's been officially announced. I remember rumors about an LTE version of the Surface Current Pro coming, but I haven't really heard any official announcement or anything from Microsoft. However, I have actually started to see these available in the commercial and the business sector. The LTE version, obviously, it's going to have a built-in LTE modem. So you can pretty much take it anywhere, well, almost anywhere where there's cell phone coverage or LTE cell phone coverage, and have access to the internet to be able to browse the internet, watch videos, work, or whatever you need to do on your Surface Pro. So that's a welcome change. That's something that's kind of been um, asked for in the market, I believe. But me personally, right now, what I typically do, I'll just tether my tablet to my phone, because I normally always have my phone with me. So it's not that big of a deal breaker, but I think for some people, having that LTE capability just fully baked into the laptop is definitely a benefit. So the Surface Pro 2017 release, continued that tradition of additional refinement. Got a little bit thinner, get a little bit cooler, get a little bit quieter, a whole lot faster. So all those improvements has been happening over time, as the Surface continue iterating, continue to be the market leader or near the market leader as far as this form factor is concerned. And then again, as we continue, as Microsoft continue to make refinements to the platform, other vendors and OEMs follow suit with their own refinements and releases of similar platforms, normally at a little bit cheaper cost than the Surface Pro, since I think they're trying to, I think the Surface line is kind of pitched as like kind of the Halo product or top tier um, hybrid tablet, and then there's other vendors will cut a few corners here and there, still release a quality product, but maybe not as quite as expensive as the Surface Pro can get to be. So the current Surface Pro is a 12.3-inch screen. The resolution has gone up a little bit from some of the previous releases, and let's keep on going here. So it's kind of have three high-level versions that you can get. So there's one with a Core M3 processor, and there's also a Core i5 and a Core i7 version of that. The neat thing about the current Surface Pro is that the Core M3 and I believe the Core i5 also, they don't have a fan. So they run really quiet and cool. Because there's been improvement in Intel's generation of the processor where they can run without needing any active cooling for the most part, where they can be passively cool and still work fine. And then, like I said, you also have the i7, which is the more higher performance version of that. And then within each one of those tiers, you may have various different memory configurations. You can have either 4, 8, or 16 gig. Each one of those are not available with all processors. So for example, the Core M3 can only go up to 4 gig. The i5 and i7 there may be a cutoff there as well, but I know the i7 can go up to 16 gigs. I'm not sure if the i5 is available in 16 gig or not today. And then on the storage, you kind of have that similar kind of breakdown where each type of storage may not be available on all of the processor tiers, but you can get as little as 128 gig, and you go all the way up to 1 terabyte. And then the screen across the board is the same. So you have a 2736 by 1824 touchscreen. Very high quality touchscreen. Very high quality, very good color saturations. It's again the Surface, they try to get very good quality screens that they put into these products, which I think they branded like PixelSense is their branding of their screens that they create. Then on the graphics side, you have Intel across the board. Intel HD Graphics 615 included with the Core M3. You have the 620 series of that on the i5, and then you have the Iris Plus 640 included with the i7. Then on the connectivity side, all of the versions include Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. There's also now optional 4G LTE available. But as I mentioned, I'm not sure if that 4G LTE option would be available in the traditional consumer market. I believe they're pushing that more toward the commercial and business market. So you probably won't really find these too much in like a Best Buy or things like that, like a Best Buy or store or Micro Center or Fry's or whatever electronic store that you frequent. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. You probably won't find it in the Microsoft Store, at least for the time being. I don't believe they probably won't be really pushing that on that particular market, but we'll see as time tells if it starts showing up. And then, as I mentioned, the availability, business, commercial customers is where that's targeted. So if you go to some of the commercial vendors out there, some of the storefronts, so you may actually be able to find the LTE version of the Surface Pro available for sale to buy today. So that's something cool that's coming. Well, it's already here. So, all right. So moving on to performance. So here I'm kind of trying to perform the performance between the Surface Pro, the current generation Surface Pro, the Surface Pro 4, and the Surface Pro 3. So on the CPU side, as far as if you have it at the top end Core i7 version versus the Surface Pro 3, we have a claim about 2.5 time performance improvements. And in my preliminary tests with some of these, I tend to believe that because the Surface Pro 3, what I noticed, it tends to throttle a lot, especially in the i7 version. It tends to never really can maintain its peak performance for very long. This is kind of seen out here in the graphs here. Then on the graphics, there's also been a pretty significant improvements on the graphic front between the series, with the Surface Pro greatly outperforming the Surface Pro 3. And these graphs make it look like it's a dramatic performance game where you're going to be able to play like the best games out there. That's not the case. There is significant graphics performance improvements here, but these are not geared toward to be gaming machines or anything. I mean, you can do some light gaming, but you're not going to be able to play like AAA games at 1080p with maxed out graphics or 4K or anything like that. If that's what you're thinking about for these products, you're in the wrong series of products because they're not geared toward that. And again, they're all Intel graphics, which even mid-tier or low-end AMD and NVIDIA graphics typically outperforms Intel graphics. So there's just something to keep in mind. These are more so to be power efficient, be very good at playing video without drawing a lot of power. And then you can do some lightweight gaming and things like that, and then also some professional software you may be using, get some acceleration for that to like render videos faster, make graphics faster, and things like that. And then moving over to the noise front, Surface Pro can be much quieter than the Surface Pro 3 and the Surface Pro 4. Again, as I mentioned earlier, big part of that is two of the models actually don't have fans, so they can be pretty quiet in normal operation without having to spin up a fan to remove the heat from the system. So it kind of have a passive cooling system that works pretty well in testing so far. And then on the screen front, as I mentioned, even going back to the Surface Pro 3, the screens have been excellent across the board for the Surfaces. So the screen difference between the Surface Pro, Surface Pro 4, at least to my eyes, they look very similar. Surface Pro 3 still looks very good, but the resolution has changed between them, has changed a little bit. Maybe a little bit change in the color gamut, and things like that. So moving on to the battery side, on the battery front, the battery has also been greatly improved over the series. And a big part of that, again, is the improvements in the processor and the graphics that are driving these products. That's kind of a big part of it that's having the performance improvements that we're seeing here in battery life as well as in performance. So this is kind of applies to actually all of the Surface models, where you can have these various different stands that you can have. Well, maybe not the Surface Pro, Pro 2. Well, maybe starting at the Surface Pro 3, because if you take a look at the RT, the Surface Pro, Surface Pro 2, they didn't really have the studio mode, so you couldn't really lay them down really flat for the most part. They had a couple adjustments, but they couldn't go as low or as much flexibility as they started having it starting at the Surface Pro 3. So starting with the laptop mode, this is where if you purchase the optional keyboard, you can have a near traditional laptop stance with the unit. Then in studio mode, you can kind of push it down flat or near flat or angled up a little bit, and it's a good stance for if you're going to be drawing or kicking or using things with the pens or watching a movie or whatever you may do. Maybe stand it up as a little kiosk in the kitchen or however you're going to use it. It's kind of a good mode to use. Then you have tablet, you ditch the keyboard, and then you just kind of have a standalone tablet, fully touch enabled, but you still have the full power of an x86 laptop where you can run all your applications, whether they be designed for touch or not. You can fully use them. So that's kind of cool. That's kind of one of the things that kind of attracted me to the Surface Pro line in general, or these kind of hybrid tablets that we have out now. Because you have this flexibility to use it in a couple different ways. So let's talk about price. So on the price front, you see there's a wide gamut of prices. So you can get them from as low as about $800 for a Core i3 model, going all the way up to nearly $3,000 for the top of the line Core i7 with like a 1 terabyte SSD drive in there. So it's kind of a pretty broad spectrum of price points. But right now for like the holiday season, a lot of these products have maybe like a $200 discount going on, like probably for the next couple weeks over the holidays, starting like from like Black Friday, going up probably through Christmas. So a lot of these you probably can find some discounted from the prices you're seeing here. It just kind of depends on what your needs are. I personally think the best value is kind of the Core i5 with a 256 gigabyte. That's around where I would probably target if I was buying one of these today. Because I mean there is a performance difference between the Core i5 and the Core i7. You get the better graphics cards with the Core i7 and then a little bit faster processor. But I think for me, it's not worth the price premium to get to that level. I'm kind of, for most things that I do, the Core i5 is sufficient for everything that I do from the day to day and carrying a mobile laptop around. And then we have Surface Pro accessories. So a lot of these accessories will work with like the Surface Pro 4, Surface Pro 3, and things like that. So that they can work across the board. You kind of have I won't say universal connector, but most of the Surface, I would say like going back to the Surface Pro 3 to the present, they have a kind of a shared connector that allows you to interchange and use the various different like keyboards and things like that with all of the units. So we have the add-on type covers. So you can get that available with or without what we call a fingerprint ID. So instead of like typing a username and password or a PIN to log in, you can actually just touch your fingerprint to the keyboard to log in. And then also the Service Pros have what called Windows Hello, which is kind of a built-in camera that's in the system, which is where you can pretty much just use your face to authenticate yourself to the system. So you kind of use both of those options. Other things you have the Surface Pens. So you can buy the Surface Pen separately. The Surface Pen in the Surface Pro series is a new version of the Surface Pen. It has up to 4096 level of pressure sensitivity. And then we also have these custom tips that you can purchase and change how the pen feels as you're writing. So you can have one that has a little bit more retention or resistance as you write across the screen, or less or more, just depending on what works best for you, to make it feel more like writing pen to paper as opposed to you dragging like a piece of plastic across a piece of glass. You can kind of change that feeling, which works really good. So I was recently at a car dealership, and they happened to be using Surfaces, and they actually had the different tips on there. So that was my actually first time actually feeling that it's a significant difference from how the pen feels without the custom tips versus with those custom tips on it. It makes a huge difference in how it feels when you write. So other things you can do, or other accessories that's available that you can connect to it. So you kind of have full-size keyboards with this kind of the Surface design language. You got the full-size and flexible mouse as well, and then you also have docking stations. So docking station will allow you to add like additional USB ports, additional display ports into the system to pretty much make it a full mobile workstation. So you can add two like um, two additional monitors, maybe a printer, maybe have a microphone, just going to depend on what you're doing. Maybe have an external USB hard drive. You can kind of start plugging all those things into the docking station and to extend the ports that's built into the tablet itself. So yeah, so that's a quick history lesson on how Microsoft Surfaces and kind of an introduction to the Surface Pro. So as I said, the Surface Pro has been out for several months already. There's plenty of reviews and things out there. The main thing that is new is that there's now this LTE version that's available if you have commercial and or business access. And as I said, it may enter into the consumer space at some point, but at this point in time, I haven't seen it anywhere in the consumer space. I haven't actually even seen it on Microsoft's own site, so they're not selling it on their website currently in the Microsoft Store. But that may change in the future. So thanks for watching. Feel free to leave any comments down at the bottom, and we'll see you in the next one.